Okay, crew, here we are. Probably my favorite rotational lunge component. This is a progression, actually. I would put this right up on top of the scale. And if we're really honest with ourselves as fitness professionals, and it means it's not indicting at all, but if we're really honest with ourselves, we probably have some folks that are not going to get to the rotational lunge. So we shouldn't put square pegs in round holes. We should give them appropriate. So Josh, we've got the strength bag, we've got the power bag. I'm gonna guess most of you have power bags, but here's the deal. You can progress those people still with load, right? Moving the slots. We can progress with load even if they're not getting the rotational lunge. So you could have some advanced people in your class, just like Josh talks about in the DVRT system, advanced people doing a little more speed, velocity type stuff with pure rotational lunges, but you can have some people that are still progressing very, very effectively with the strength bag doing what we call the front loaded rotational lunge. So let's go ahead and jump down into this. Coming up into the front loaded position, for us, Josh just doing drop step lunges and passes down into this. And all he's gonna do is as he drops in, he creates a little slight rotation towards the lead leg. Now, let me make this very, very clear. We heard this early on with rotational lunge, and it might show up a little more apparently here because the bag is not moving. This is not, let me repeat that, is not a lumbar spine rotation. This is a slight T-spine rotation. Just a little bit, and here's the point. I'm gonna have Josh repeat this without the bag real quick, or actually let's download him because you can do this with the power bag as well. I'm gonna have him hold the bottom position so you can see this, and this is a very viable programming aspect. And he does his rotation, and then I'm having him come out. I want you to see his right leg here. He is not bailing out with that right hip flexor, so show him what it looks like to corkscrew yourself into the ground, Josh. Giving in that. He's staying tight and activated here. Dynamic stretch in that trailing hip flexor, tying in the top, bending down. So really, really be conscious. Keep your people tall. The anterior position of the front loaded USB is a great feedback loop for people to stay nice and tall and with that little subtle rotation. So they should get that rotation across those obliques and the hip flexors as they hold stability in that trail side glute. Obviously.
So hopefully what you're noticing as we're leading up to this rotational lunge is that Troy and I have been very adamant of the whys, not just that you're doing something cool and different. So a very popular saying in our industry is everyone's an athlete. Unfortunately, when we actually get to the training programs of people, they're not very athletic at all. They don't require people to move in different directions, patterns, they don't require different stability systems and strength development. It's very simplistic up and down type of movements. If we're going to say that people are athletes, they should be trained in athletic ways, and the rotational lunge is a great demonstration of that. The key is, how do you introduce it? So what we're going to do with Troy's going to first start with a signal. He's just going to one side and go very slow. A lot of people always assume that the rotational lunge has to be performed very quickly. It doesn't. Just like a lot of our different variables, we can slow down the speed so we can groove the pattern. What we want to do is keep a really tall upright torso. We're not trying to lean into the movement. He's creating hip flexion, hip extension as he does so by drop stepping lunging, which gives the bag a little bit of opportunity to be absorbed by the body and then projected upwards. So think in terms of just being a different way of sort of doing that kettlebell swing. Now, a lot of times people would assume, well, we're just going to go fast from there, we're just going to build up speed. I actually really like to build up a strength component. So in order to absorb that force, and because it's a unique pattern, we're going to use a little heavier weight and keep the pattern pretty slow. So as Troy sort of mentioned earlier when we were doing the rotational lunge and the T-spine, what you're going to look for is actually also that opposite hip to lose its stability. A lot of people, they over-focus on the side of the load and they forget that we're trying to do these X pattern tie-ins to create that cross-body stability. This gives him an opportunity to build that eccentric strength to absorb a lighter load coming down harder upon him. Remember, as he's increasing speed, we're looking for him to be able to maintain his postural alignment the entire time. The final component then will be to add the smaller USB again. Now, here's where a lot of people don't understand our DVRT system. We are changing loads, but we're also changing the dimension of the implement. So these two weights could actually be the same. However, their feel is going to be quite different because the dimension is quite different. So when we go to a smaller ultimate sandbag, 40 pounds can still be a significant load, but because of the compact nature, it's a little easier to control. So what we're going to do is work on those sort of different points again. Troy's going to start low, and he's going to build up, actually getting a higher swing as he does what? Creates more force from the ground coming up. He's not swinging with his arms, just like in a kettlebell swing, he's creating the force by his legs. And oftentimes we can create a little pause at the bottom to make sure he catches it and receives the weight in the proper position alignment before we have him go back and forth. Nice job, Troy. So hopefully what we've sort of shown you is a linear progression of how to teach some of these concepts. What's really important to Troy and I is that you are understanding the components that make up of each drill, so you understand why you're starting at one point going to another point. Over the course of a class, you can have people doing what looks outwardly as very different movements, but with very similar